Okay, so imagine this, right?
Yeah.
You're a parent, and it's 2001. Your daughter's just landed this exciting internship in Washington, D.C.
Oh, wow.
She's ambitious, she's bright, she's got her whole life ahead of her.
Right.
And then suddenly, she vanishes.
Yeah.
And to make matters even worse,
Hmm.
her disappearance gets completely overshadowed by, like, one of the biggest tragedies in American history.
Oh, wow. That's tough.
It's a truly heartbreaking story.
Right.
This is what happened to Chandra Levy's family,
Right.
and it really captures how easily individual tragedies can get lost in the noise of major events.
Yeah, absolutely.
So for this deep dive, we're going to be looking at the Chandra Levy case through the lens of the You're Wrong About podcast,
Okay.
which, by the way, does an incredible job of just piecing together, like, all the facts,
Right.
the media frenzy, and all the investigative missteps that just plague this case. Like, it's
Yeah.
really well done.
What's fascinating about this is, it kind of seemed like at first glance, you see it and it's like this classic political scandal.
Yeah.
A young intern vanishes in the heart of D.C. A powerful congressman gets caught up in the mystery.
Right.
It's got all the ingredients, right?
Yeah.
For like a headline-grabbing story.
Oh, totally. And the media certainly ran with it. But I think, as we dig deeper,
Yeah.
it becomes really clear that there's so much more to this story than just, like, a salacious political affair, right?
100%. We're going to try to unravel all these layers of this case, examine the missed opportunities, and we're going to kind of
Right.
explore how assumptions and media narratives can just cloud the search for truth.
It's so true.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's start, like, right at the beginning by setting the scene.
Okay.
It's the year 2000. Chandra Levy, this 24-year-old woman from Modesto, California,
Right.
arrives in Washington, D.C., full of, hopes and dreams and aspirations.
Ambitious.
She's earned a master's degree in public administration. She's super passionate about criminal justice.
Yeah.
And she's managed to land this coveted internship with the Federal Bureau of Prisons.
That's fantastic. And understanding Chandra's personality is actually super crucial here.
Yeah.
She wasn't your stereotypical naive intern.
Right.
She was described as outdoorsy,
Right.
athletic, and she even had a bit of a rebellious streak.
Rebellious. How so?
So her parents were described as having this very California crunchy lifestyle,
Yeah.
health conscious, a bit alternative.
Yeah.
So for Chandra, rebellion meant a fascination with law enforcement.
Oh, interesting.
She would hang out at the Modesto police station, go on ride-alongs.
Huh.
There's even a story about her attending a police academy graduation when she was just 13 years old, dressed in a full police uniform.
Oh, wow. That's fascinating. So she was drawn to the world of law enforcement from a very young age,
Yeah,
which is interesting considering the circumstances of her disappearance.
absolutely. And it also challenges that image of the naive, easily manipulated intern.
Right.
Even Gary Pondit, the congressman who became entangled in the case,
Right.
later described her as mature for her age and savvy.
So how does Condit enter the picture?
Right.
Wasn't it like a chance encounter?
Well, they did meet by chance,
Okay.
or at least that's how the story goes. There's actually a photograph of their first meeting.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I think I've seen that one. It's a little
Yeah,
awkward, isn't it?
it is. Chandra's got this big 80s style hair,
Right.
barely tamed by the DC humidity, and she looks a little starstruck, standing next to Condit, who's sporting, that classic politician on a power walk look.
Yeah.
Even their outfits clash. Chandra's in casual clothes while Condit's in a suit.
Mhm.
And if I remember correctly,
Yeah.
New Balance sneakers.
That's right. The New Balances. I remember that detail from the podcast.
Yeah.
It's like such a weird juxtaposition.
Total clash of styles.
And apparently, Chandra told her mom that Condit looked like Harrison Ford.
Oh, really?
I don't know if I see the resemblance, but
I don't know about that.
well, maybe, love or at least infatuation is blind, right?
Maybe.
Whatever it was,
Yeah.
this meeting definitely sparked something.
Right.
Phone records later revealed that there were tons of calls between Chandra and Condit's office.
Wow.
And she started making all these cryptic comments to family and friends about seeing an older, important man.
Interesting.
There were gifts from Condit
Uh-huh.
and even a mention of, get this, a 5-year plan.
A 5-year plan. That sounds a bit more serious than a casual fling.
Right. And to add fuel to the fire, Condit's wife was often away during the week.
Oh. Well,
So Condit, of course, denied any romantic involvement,
Yeah.
claiming they were just
Oh,
friends.
right.
But, I mean, Come on. The evidence pointing to a secret relationship was starting to pile up.
Friends who exchange countless phone calls and spend time alone in apartments.
Exactly. That's what they always say, right? So what happened next? When did Chandra actually disappear?
So on May 1st, 2001, Chandra vanished without a trace.
Wow.
Like, completely gone.
Yeah.
The last anyone heard from her was this email that she sent to her parents that morning talking about flight options back to California.
Yeah.
It seems like she had lost her internship and was preparing to return home,
Wow.
and then silence.
So did they find any clues in her apartment?
Her apartment was found empty, but
Okay.
strangely undisturbed.
Oh.
Like, there were no signs of a struggle, and most of her belongings were still there.
Really?
It was almost as if she had just walked out and never returned.
That's eerie. So what did the police do? Like, did they have any leads at all?
So this is where the investigation really starts to go off the rails.
Oh,
The police made just a series of, critical errors early on.
okay.
They, for some reason, wiped her computer's search history,
Wow.
which could have provided valuable clues about her last known activities.
Of course, yeah.
And then they also missed the window to secure security footage from her building.
Those seem like pretty significant oversights.
Oh, they were huge.
But surely they had something else to go on, right?
Well, Chandra's parents had noticed a particular phone number
Okay.
that she'd been calling frequently.
Right.
And this number turned out to belong to Gary Condit's office.
Uh-oh. So was Condit considered a suspect at that point?
Publicly, the police downplayed Condit's involvement.
Okay.
But privately, they were leaking information to the media, suggesting that he was their prime suspect.
Oh, wow. That's like the classic good cop, bad cop routine,
Yeah.
but with the media as the intermediary.
Exactly. And Chandra's parents, desperate for answers,
Yeah.
hired this PR firm to try to bring national attention to the case.
Which probably put even more pressure on the police to find a solution.
And
Fast.
interesting.
Absolutely. And then Condit made a series of blunders
Okay.
that only intensified this media frenzy.
What did he do? Well, he gave this really awkward interview where he called Chandra a great friend, but refused to discuss, the nature of their relationship.
Yeah.
And then there's the whole watch box incident.
Oh, yeah, the watch box. Remind me about that.
Right. So right before the police were scheduled to search Condit's apartment,
Right.
he was spotted tossing a watch box into a dumpster.
Okay.
It later came out that the watch was a gift from another woman he'd been involved with.
Not exactly the move of an innocent man.
No, not at all. And it fed right into the media's narrative of,
Yeah.
this powerful man trying to cover up his involvement in a young woman's disappearance.
Well,
But here's where things take an unexpected turn.
okay.
While the entire world was fixated on Gary Condit,
Yeah.
something else was happening in Rock Creek Park.
Okay.
The same park where Chandra was last seen jogging.
This is where it gets really interesting. Tell me more.
So on May 14th, just 2 weeks after Chandra disappeared, a woman jogging in Rock Creek Park was attacked. And this wasn't just, like a random mugging or something.
Right.
The attacker was incredibly violent.
Really?
Yeah, he even threatened to kill her if she screamed.
Oh, wow. That's terrifying.
It was a truly terrifying ordeal for her.
So did they catch the attacker?
Yes, thankfully.
Okay, good.
On July 1st, just a couple of months later, another woman was attacked while jogging in the same park.
Oh.
And this time, the attacker was caught.
Okay.
His name was Ingmar Guandik.
Ingmar Guandik. That name rings a bell.
Yeah, he's the man who would eventually be convicted of Chandra Levy's murder.
Oh. Right.
But that's jumping ahead in the story a bit.
Yeah.
At this point, Guandik was an 18-year-old El Salvadoran immigrant who was struggling to, make ends meet in the U.S.
Right. So what happened after he was arrested for the attacks in Rock Creek Park? Did they connect him to Chandra's disappearance at all?
That's the most mind-boggling part of this whole story.
Yeah.
The park police who handled the assault cases,
Right.
they didn't share any of this information
What?
with the detectives who were investigating Chandra's disappearance.
You're telling me they had a suspect in
Yeah.
custody
Uh-huh.
who was attacking women in the same park where Chandra was last seen,
Exactly.
and they didn't even consider him as a possible lead in her case.
It's unbelievable, right? It's a prime example of, how tunnel vision and a lack of communication between different law enforcement agencies
Right.
can have, truly devastating consequences.
So while the entire world was focused on Gary Condit, Ingmar Guandik was sitting in jail, completely off the radar of the Levy investigation.
Yep.
What a colossal misstep.
It really was, and it would be years
There.
before Gwandik would even be considered as a suspect in Chandra's disappearance.
Right.
Meanwhile, the media just continued to obsess over Condit, dissecting his every move, analyzing his body language, speculating about his involvement.
It's a classic example of how media narratives can just take on a life of their own,
Yeah,
even when they're not supported by the facts.
absolutely. And this intense scrutiny really had a profound impact on Condit's life.
Right.
He lost his re-election bid, his reputation was tarnished, and his career was, effectively destroyed.
It's a reminder that even in the absence of a conviction, the court of public opinion can be a powerful and unforgiving force.
Right, exactly.
So what happened next? How did Gwandik finally become a suspect in Chandra's case?
Okay, so in October 2001, just a few months after 9/11,
Right.
a jailhouse informant came forward claiming that Gwandik had confessed to killing Chandra Levy.
Oh, wow. But there were some major problems with the informant story, right?
Oh, yeah, big time.
Like what?
Well, for starters, he claimed that Gwandik had been paid $25,000 by Gary Condit to carry out the murder.
Oh, come on.
Yeah, it seemed like a pretty desperate attempt to tie the case back to Condit and just keep that media frenzy alive.
Of course, yeah.
And to make matters worse, the informant also failed a polygraph test, which, further undermined his credibility.
Okay, so the informant story was pretty far-fetched.
Yeah.
What about Gwandik himself? Did he ever confess to the crime?
He took a polygraph test as well,
Right.
but the results were inconclusive. The police tried to blame it on a language barrier, but the whole thing just felt really shaky.
So if the informant story was unreliable and Gwandik wasn't confessing, why didn't they just drop the whole thing?
They kind of did.
Uh-huh.
Gwandik was charged and sentenced to 10 years in prison for those assaults in Rock Creek Park.
Right.
But as far as Chandra's case was concerned, the police seemed to hit a dead end.
Okay.
The informant's story was just too weak.
Yeah.
And they didn't have any other concrete evidence linking Gwandik to Chandra.
So they had this guy who was attacking women in the same park where Chandra disappeared
Right.
around the same time,
Uh-huh.
and they just let it go.
It's mind-boggling, isn't it? Even the judge, during Gwandik's sentencing hearing, commented on the similarities between the attacks and Chandra's disappearance, and actually asked the prosecutors if there was any connection. But the prosecutors basically shrugged it off, saying they didn't have enough evidence to pursue that angle.
That's incredibly frustrating.
Mm-hmm.
So what about Chandra's family? Were they just left with no answers, no closure?
This is where we hit another shocking twist.
Okay.
In May 2002, almost a year after she vanished,
Right.
Chandra's remains were finally found
Oh, wow.
in Rock Creek Park.
In the park. But they searched that park thoroughly, didn't they?
Well, they thought they did. Remember all those early blunders we talked about?
Yeah.
It turns out they only searched a limited area of the park. They basically stuck to the paved paths.
Oh, wow.
Chandra's remains were discovered off the beaten path in this really heavily wooded area that had been completely overlooked.
You've got to be kidding me. They missed her body because they didn't search the entire park. That's heartbreaking.
It is. It's a tragic testament to how, a flawed investigation can have these really devastating consequences.
Right.
And it would take several more years
Uh-huh.
and some serious pressure from the media
Right.
before the police would finally take another look at Ingmar Gwandik.
So what happened? How did Gwandik end up back on their radar?
So in 2008, the Washington Post published this massive, 13-part investigative series on the Chandra Levy case.
Okay.
And they just laid bare all the police blunders.
Yeah.
And really highlighted all the evidence pointing to Gwandik.
Right.
It was a really damning indictment of the investigation.
Wow.
And it seemed to kind of shame the police into taking action.
It sounds like the Washington Post played a crucial role in getting this case back on track.
Oh, they absolutely did.
Did for them.
Shortly after the series was published, another jailhouse informant emerged.
No. Another one.
Yeah, claiming that Gwandik had confessed to him as well.
Okay.
And this time, the police went for it.
Okay.
Gwandik was charged with Chandra's murder and ultimately sentenced to 60 years in prison.
Wow. 60 years based on the word of a jailhouse informant. That doesn't exactly scream justice to me.
You and me both.
And remember that first informant story about Condit paying Gwandik to kill Chandra?
Yeah,
That completely fell apart.
it did. So now we're left with this second informant
Okay.
whose credibility was, shall we say,
Yeah.
questionable at best.
Right. It's a bit unsettling that someone's fate could hinge on the testimony of a jailhouse informant,
Right.
especially when there's already so much doubt surrounding the case.
It raises some serious questions about the reliability of jailhouse informants
Yeah.
and, how much weight their testimony carries in our justice system.
Absolutely.
And as you'll see, this issue would come back to haunt the case in a major way.
So Guandique's behind bars, and it seems like that's it for the Chandra Levy case, right? Like, closed book.
You'd think so, but the story's full of twists and turns, remember?
Right, of course. What happened?
So in 2015, they ordered a retrial. There were concerns about the evidence and surprise, surprise,
Oh, no.
the reliability of that second jailhouse informant.
That whole thing was just so shady.
It really was.
So, okay, retrial. Then what?
This is where things get really weird. Enter Babs Perrin, an out-of-work actress who claims she has information that could, blow the case wide open.
An actress.
Ah.
This is getting more and more like a Hollywood movie plot.
Uh-huh.
Okay, what's her connection to the case?
So she was dating the second jailhouse informant,
Oh, wow.
the one whose testimony put Guandique away for 60 years.
Right, right.
And she started recording their conversations, claiming that on tape, he admitted to making up his entire testimony about Guandique confessing.
So he's admitting to lying on tape.
That's what she said.
Wow.
She even went to Chandra's mother with this information, saying she had proof that Guandique was innocent.
It's like something out of a TV show.
I know, right?
Well.
And of course, the media was all over this.
Oh, yeah, I bet.
Huge news.
So it sounds like this Babs Perrin was really determined to, expose the truth, even if it meant going up against the entire justice system.
She really was. But then, the biggest twist of all, when they finally released the tapes,
Yeah.
the informant doesn't actually admit to lying about Guandique's confession. Not a single word.
What? But she was so sure he'd confessed to lying on those tapes. What happened?
It's a total mystery.
Huh.
She claimed the recordings must have malfunctioned or the files got corrupted somehow.
Mm.
But the bottom line is, there was no evidence on those tapes to support her claims.
This whole thing is so strange. It's like we're going deeper and deeper down this rabbit hole. But okay, even if he didn't explicitly admit to lying about the confession, there must have been something on those tapes that made her so convinced he was being dishonest, right?
There was, on those same tapes.
Okay.
The informant was heard admitting to a whole bunch of other shady stuff.
Like what?
Involvement with gangs, planning crimes, even threatening to kill someone. Yeah. Not exactly the most credible witness, to say the least.
I mean, so he's a criminal, possibly a violent one,
Right.
and his testimony is what put Guandique away for 60 years.
Yeah, it's a pretty damning revelation.
Yeah, it is.
And it completely destroyed the informant's credibility.
Right.
The prosecution's case against Guandique crumbled, and within days, the charges were dropped.
Wow. So after all that, Guandique just walked free.
Yeah, pretty much. He was deported back to El Salvador in 2017.
And that's it. That's the end of the story.
That's pretty much where it ends.
It's a really unsettling outcome. We've gone through this whole deep dive, explored all these crazy twists and turns, and we're basically left with more questions than answers. Gary Condit, despite his, questionable actions and evasive behavior,
Right.
was never actually charged in connection with Chandra's disappearance.
Yeah.
Ingmar Guandique, the man who was ultimately convicted of her murder, is now free and living in another country.
Yeah, it's wild.
And Chandra's family is still left wondering what truly happened to their daughter.
It's a tragic reminder that sometimes there just aren't any easy answers.
Right.
No satisfying conclusions.
Yeah.
The justice system, as we've seen, is far from perfect.
It really is.
The media can create narratives that distort the truth and have lasting consequences for everyone involved.
It's true.
And sometimes the truth itself remains elusive, buried under layers of speculation and uncertainty.
What strikes me most about this case is how easily the focus shifted from Guandique to Condique.
Yeah.
It seemed like everyone, from the media to the investigators, was so caught up in the idea of this, salacious political scandal
Right.
that they overlooked a very real and dangerous suspect.
You're absolutely right. That initial assumption that Condique must be involved
Yeah.
simply because of his position of power and his relationship with Chandra,
Right.
it created this huge blind spot in the investigation.
100%.
It allowed Guandique to slip through the cracks,
Yeah.
and it delayed justice for Chandra and her family.
This case also highlights how dangerous it can be to rely so heavily on jailhouse informants.
Yeah.
I mean, they're often motivated by self-interest, right?
Absolutely.
Whether it's a reduced sentence or just the desire for notoriety.
Exactly.
And as we saw, their testimony can be completely unreliable
Right.
and easily manipulated.
The Chandra Levy case is like a cautionary tale.
Yeah.
It's about the importance of critical thinking, questioning assumptions,
Right.
and demanding a higher standard of evidence.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to these really serious crimes.
100%.
Well, that was a really intense deep dive.
Yeah, it was.
Thanks for taking this journey with us. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to our show and, tell your friends.
Spread the word.
We'll be back soon with another fascinating deep dive into a topic that's sure to keep you thinking.